Hello, everyone. Welcome to Zobrio University's webinar on ZAI, the power of APIs to save money and time. Today we have Rob Raymond, the Executive Vice President here at Zobrio, to lead the webinar. If you have any questions, please leave them in the chat, which is located at the bottom of your screen, and we will go over all questions at the end. Thank you, and I'll now hand it over to Rob.
Thank you, Colleen, and certainly much appreciation to all that could join. Obviously, stressful time. We have a lot of our organizations that are off this week, so again, appreciate your time. Luckily, for many of us, we can work remotely, and so can the software. So that kind of leads us into this topic, as Colleen mentioned, where we're going to talk today about an API. What is an API? It's a term that's commonly used in the industry and being used more and more. So we want to get a basic understanding of an API. And then what we'll do is we'll switch right into the software and show you how, with your Zobrio product, you can utilize APIs, and how in the instance of perhaps bringing in revenue into your organization, how an API can help create efficiencies. So let's start off by, what is an API? Well, the acronym stands for an application programming interface. And I'm going to step back a little bit in time. I won't go too far back, but back in the day when software was written, if there were features and functions within a company's software solution, they would create the interface, the relationship between those functions internally. So if I were writing software that created a bill, I would also be able to have software that would collect that bill and maybe report that bill to my accounting system. Well, as time went on, more of a best of breed approach happened, so that you'd have different vendors with different software that was good and specific at satisfying certain features and functions. And so that's when the interface between those kinds of solutions changed. And the common use, which is absolutely still out there today, and we're going to look a little bit at that, the common use of connecting one system's software functionality to another was the generation of a file and then the acceptance of the file. So what the API does is, instead of the necessity to create a file and maybe copy that file and paste that file somewhere and then go into another solution and browse to that file and then accept that file, what the API does is it eliminates that manual interaction, and literally it's a protocol, if you will, where one program talks to another program, and that API becomes the messenger that delivers that information. So what does that do? What is the advantage? Well, it takes the physical act of going into a website perhaps, and downloading payments that came in through a payment portal and copying and pasting and going through that process that I described manually. It automates that. So we don't want programs to interact with each other without you being able to review, edit, and accept. But that mechanical piece we can eliminate through the API. And there are other advantages as well, as the API and the programs that connect to each other have the ability to do error checking that obviously can help find problems. So we're going to show an example of that as well. So that is basically what an API is. So when you hear that term out there, that's, and it's not something that happens automatically. You need companies to work together to create that API, but once it's done, obviously, it's a very powerful tool. So specifically for Zobrio Actionable Intelligence, and in particular, our banking solution, formerly known more as Zobrio Cash Management, what we want to show you is how we have created what we call an open API. So we have a process whereby any company that your organization might use to either generate bills or collect payments in particular, that we can actually provide them with an open API kit, which gives them the instructions of how to use our API. And the advantage to you is that information will come into your system for you to review automatically. So in particular, that's what we're going to look at right now. So let me hop, I'm going to stop sharing this slide and move right into the application. Let me start fresh here. So I'm going to log into a test database. Runs a little slower when I'm on a Zoom session, so bear with it. Let me just throw up some data so we're not looking at a blank screen. So when you're utilizing our open API functionality, what's different, or one of the things that's different, is that you'll notice this blue icon next to the username. So I'm logged in as Zobrio1, and next to here is this messaging open API notification dialog box, which certain users within your organization can have the ability to see every, let's call it, batch of information that comes into your system. And again, what we're talking about today is payments. So the example that we're using is a payment portal. There's software out there that people use to pay their bills. And when they pay those bills can be grouped together and can automatically show up in your system, in your batch. And so, one, we want to notify the person, the user, that that the batch goes to, because it's gonna go right into their, when they log in, they're gonna see, oh, I've got a batch of information. They're gonna go into their batch and we'll see this, and they'll see it. But also you might have a financial officer, a treasurer, multiple other people that generally are keeping track of all the different batches that can come in to the variety of departments if there are multiple departments receiving this kind of money. So as I'm logged in, I'm seeing all these batches. I have this icon, and when it's blue, it means that it's empty, that there's nothing there. What we're going to do is we're going to simulate what would happen if your payment portal grouped the payments that came over, let's say a day, which is usually the normal case, and maybe at a certain time at night, it's 12 o'clock at night, the payment portal, send out this batch through the API to your organization. So I'm gonna simulate that happening by utilizing, hold on a sec, this little API generator. And there it is. And so literally, for our own testing, we set this up so that we could act as a payment portal or third-party billing system would. So I'm going to post receipts, but let's go back to our application and we'll shrink it just a little bit. Keep an eye on the blue, because when I go to post receipts, our system here, Zobrio, is constantly polling outside in the world and looking to say, hey, is there a batch out there? Hey, is there a batch out there? So when there is a batch, that blue will turn to red. And it should do that shortly. And this icon that we see will be on everybody's workstation that receives an API. So again, I'm logged in, I'm a full user, I have rights to see this. So what just happened was, I would have come in normally in the morning, I'd see that there were batches that got sent into my organization. And when I click it, now instead of being empty, it's showing the batches that came in, where they went, and where they came from. So this originator, City Hall Systems, is a company that we work with. And so we set this up to show you, one, it can do error detection. So in this instance, it's saying, hey, the payment portal producer sent a payment that we have no record of. So within the Zobrio system, all the revenue that you have has a name to it. We call it a source, whether it's a building permit, whether it's a donation, whether it's a parking ticket, what have you. There's a name. And so when that payment portal, in this case, City Hall Systems, sent that name, we realized, Zobrio realized that we couldn't find it. So in this instance, you would see it and you would be able to add that name or call us to say, we haven't set that payment up yet, or there was some issue in setting up that payment. The point is that the program, the API, is looking at that and making sure things match up. Also here are two successes. So we've got a batch that was created for the ZCM user. So whoever got it, you'd see who that user was and you'd know they received a batch at this time. And in this case, it's 2 batches. So if I now move on and pretend I am just the receipt user, obviously I could be in the treasurer's office or in that financial office. I could be the same user. But either way, note I too have that icon. I know what's in my batch. And as soon as I came in, I see that there's a batch created from the Open API. I will know who the originator is. It's City Hall Systems. I know the amounts. I can go in now and edit the batch and see what's in it. And in this instance, there's just 2 receipts and they were credit card payments. Now, if there's a need to distinguish whether it was paid by Discover or Visa versus American Express, obviously that can be done as well. This is a very simple example. But what's unique about this is that when the API comes in, not only is the information automatically sitting there in the batch ready for you to create a turnover or what we call a schedule of payment, but it also has within it, and this is very important, it has the banking deposit information. So we know that even though this payment was made on a particular day, and maybe it was a Saturday, who knows, it was made on a particular day, that it's going to be part of a deposit that's going to be at a future day. So because we know that information, if you utilize the API, then when you accept these batches of information, we're actually going to group these receipts into the future batch so that you don't have to, and so that that deposit is going to match exactly to your bank statement. So that's as opposed to, and I want to show you this, the method that exists if you don't have an API is, again, you're generating a file. So I just want to show that quickly. In the example, what I'm not showing is I would have had to have come in the morning, browsed to the payment portal provider, logged in, seen what was available, what came in that day, generated the file, copied the file, pasted the file to a place that I would then go into Zobrio Cash Management, click my import receipts, and here's an example of one that I copy and pasted. I would click it. I'm gonna say I'm the collectors department. I would import it. I would review it. This one had 21 receipts, and there were ACH payments and a Visa MasterCard payment. And I would be done with the batch. And so that process of, again, going onto the website, logging in, creating the file, copying the file, pasting the file, going into Zobrio, going into import receipts, and browsing to that file and bringing it in, which is where this has now ended up, this $915 worth of payments that are in this batch 328. In the open API example, this came in automatically. So that's the one advantage. And the other is that when I go to create the turnover report or schedule a payment report, and I have those batches in it, so there's 2 batches, 2 receipts. If I then accept that batch within my cash book, and there it is, 41. What this has done is it says that these 4 batches are going to be, we already know because of the open API, how they're going to be grouped and part of a future deposit. So when I say record that deposit, basically the system is saying, I know that those 4 receipts are going to end up in 2 different, grouped in 2 different deposits, one on the 10th and one on the 12th. And that is based on whatever the business rules of that payment portal is. Example being, you know, I pay on Saturday with an ACH, and that's going to be part of a deposit on Monday. But if I used a Visa card, it might be part of a deposit on Wednesday. And the credit cards have different rules based on how they treat Saturday and Sunday and how they treat banking holidays. So all those rules that you would use manually to group these transactions are done automatically, because again, that deposit information is provided through that API messenger. So in this example, if I accept the schedule of payment, it is making these 2 deposits, 923 and 924. So if I hop over to my bank ledger and bring up the bank account that is associated with that payment portal, let's give it some dates here. I'm just going to sort by date. And sure enough, there's my 923 batch and my 924 batch, which, if you utilize our OFX, and this will be another session that we'll run to talk about this, But if you use the ability to download a digital representation of the bank statement, that you would literally be able to compare that bank statement automatically to Zobrio, and Zobrio would do the clearing for you, would check these for clear. You'd be in bank rec, you'd be able to review it, make sure it's correct, and then reconcile. So basically what happens with the API is it's really helping ultimately the automatic reconciliation. Why? Because when those transactions showed up in the batch, because we utilize the API, we have that deposit information and how those transactions are going to be grouped. And thus, downstream, when we come to bank reconciliation, we can literally reconcile with one click of a button. So if we go in and look at this batch, we see the two receipts. And if I drill into one of them, I have that full history of the receipt. I know when it was paid. I know when the deposit was going to be, that future date. I know the amount, the bank. I can always come back and bring up that turnover it came from. I know where it came from, the payment portal, and what the payment type was. And again, today, it's credit cards and ACH. That being said, there's Venmo, Zelle, PayPal, Stripe. There's a whole host of other payment vehicles that are going to be part of how people pay now, some now, but definitely in the future. So being able to utilize the open API will help you allow for people to pay you in different forms that are convenient for them. And remember, by offering a variety of different ways to pay, you still, by utilizing the open API, can automate how those different payments are going to be grouped and deposited into the correct bank account. So the API, in summary, will provide that banking information, but also create that efficiency that we talked about in terms of not having to go in and, one, remember to do it, but two, manually take the time to bring in a file, and then obviously three, being able to group that deposit. Now, the last thing I want to say, and then certainly if there's any questions, I want to be conscious of everyone's time. The last thing I will say is the people that have the right to look at all the APIs except these schedule of payments, they also can say, yeah, I received that one, and I received this one. And so you can keep this notification window clean. Maybe I still need to do work on this one, so I want to keep it there. But if you want to see a history of all the APIs that you've that have come in to your organization, you can always look at all of them and be able to search by date to if you're looking back at batches that came in from a prior date. So that being said, I hope this has been helpful at a minimum to understand when you hear that term API, what it means, and then more specifically, if you're utilizing our Zobrio Actionable Intelligence Banking Module, ZCM, you get a good understanding, hopefully, of how that can help you utilize payment portals more to your users and be able to create efficiency in your own organizations, ultimately by how you reconcile. Colleen?
Alrighty, thank you everyone for joining us. A recording of this webinar will be made available shortly.
Great. Thanks all.